Do you like scary stories? Do you tell scary stories around campfires, or do you tell them to your children or grandchildren and just watch them get all anxious and nervous and then you, boo? Well, today we're going to be in Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20, and I'm already hearing the voice of Vincent Price as our narrator. Remember Vincent Price? He was the he was the prince of scary stories, scary movie making, and boo! If you know Michael Jackson's music video for the Thriller song, that's Vincent Price's voice at the end. Who can see the Thriller? If you think I'm a little bit over the top, absolutely not. This is a frightening story. And if you remember, when we left Jesus and his posse in the boat, yesterday's story from the calming of the sea left Jesus's disciples terrified, not of the storm, which had been calmed, but of the man himself. The last expression from them in Mark chapter 4, as they are in the boat crossing the lake to go to the other side, which will be the continuance of a scary story in a moment. But their last expression was in terror, "Who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him." And so today we open just a short time later, which means it's still dark outside. Or maybe at the very outside timeline, it's in the shadows between the darkest night and the beginning of daybreak. So it is a perfect time for a scary story, and this is one, and for a variety of reasons. It's a story of priorities. So let's get into it, shall we? So they've crossed the sea. So to be on the western side of the sea to the eastern side is a journey that would have taken just a few hours. And even with the storm that we saw yesterday, it didn't hold them up probably enough. But without a doubt, it's either dark or in the shadows when they reach the other side of the sea. So Mark 5, verse 1, and we'll go through verse 20. There's three movements here about Jesus and his priorities, about the people affected by this story and their priorities, and then by the man who was healed and his priority. So here we go. First, priority people from Jesus' perspective. They came, that's Jesus and the posse, and the other boats too. They came to the other side of the sea, and I would say they're still reeling from their experience on the sea, into the country of the Gerasenes or the Gadarenes. This is a territory not populated primarily by Jews or even following strictly the Jewish law. This is what we would call the area of the Decapolis or the 10 cities. Verse 2, when he, Jesus, got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. So just get the picture. There are caves built into the limestone cliffs here on this side of the sea, and in those caves, tombs are fashioned and the dead are laying in them. And so, from this story of terror on the sea, they immediately reach the shore and get out, and there is a graveyard terror awaiting them. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. So here's this man come rushing out. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. And no one was strong enough to subdue him. So this supernatural strength that came with possession had this man in abject torment, really in a supernatural, monstrous condition. There was probably some chains, shackles on his wrist and on his ankles that were hanging off of him. He was in all kinds of physical distress, as you'll see more in a second. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and gashing himself with stones. This was a man in dire need of help and on his way to being destroyed by these demons. Now, this shouldn't surprise us, except for the fact that we in the West have sort of lost sight of the reality of demonic activity. And I think that diminishes our experience with supernatural life in Christ overall. But if you remember in John chapter 10, Jesus says that the mission of Satan and his demons is to steal, kill, and destroy. And we see throughout Scripture that Satan and now his legion, to be coming up in a minute, have one mission in mind. That is to destroy human lives. So this man is gashing himself. This man is destroying himself under this rigorous torment and possession of demons. Verse 6, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed before him, and shouting with a loud voice, this is where it gets even more frightening. We have this strong man unable to be subdued, which is a reference for us back to the previous story in Mark, where the Pharisees, the religious leaders, are accusing Jesus of casting out demons by the power of Satan himself. And Jesus said, no, if I cast out Satan by Satan, then I'm a house divided, and a house divided against itself cannot stand. And Jesus then tells this little parable of a strong man that must be bound before you can defeat him and clean up his efforts. And this is now a personalized picture of that strong man. Verse 7, shouting with a loud voice, the man said, what business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me. For Jesus had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. So Jesus, by his authority, was already giving commands to the strong man within this man that he leave him. And so the demons, plural, using the the first person plural, we are begging Jesus not to torment them, and actually invoking the name of God. I implore you by God, do not torment me. So he's vacillating back and forth between the first person plural and the first person singular, which has just got to be this disorientation for everybody watching. And Jesus's followers, who are just coming off of terror, are now being amplified in their terror. And Jesus was asking him, verse 9, what is your name? And the man said to Jesus, my name is Legion. Now, this is a term for about 6,000 Roman soldiers, which are a terrifying force of their own. And just a legion of Roman soldiers do damage that's unspeakable in their own domination of the world at this time. They would come in and just shred like locusts everything they wanted. They would steal, they would plunder, they would take hostage, make slaves, they would rape the women. So this whole word legion just brings to mind this human terror. And now what this man is saying is, I am being possessed by this multiple army of demons. My name is Legion, for we are many. And he now began to implore Jesus earnestly not to send them out of the area or out of the country. Verse 11, now there was a large herd of swine, pigs, feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons implored Jesus, saying, send us into these swine so that we may enter them. Jesus gave them permission. Now we need to pause here and recognize, as we said yesterday, that Jesus is the authority over all things natural and all things supernatural. And so he must be asked, and he must give permission for all sub-authorities to act. Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them. So just picture this, a herd of 2,000 pigs, all of a sudden just going from probably grazing peacefully to rushing as quickly as possible down a steep embankment into the sea. And they were drowned there in the sea. So that is Jesus in his priority for people. He gets out of the boat after a fairly rigorous journey, not for him, but in his humanity, he's probably tired, and he was working all day, as we saw the parable of the soils, we saw his teaching, we saw healings, and we saw his confrontations, we saw his parables, and now it gets out of this boat on the other side of the sea at the land of the Gadarenes in the area of the Decapolis, and we don't know what plans he had. Plans to rest and to sleep and then to spend a long period of time there. We don't know them. All we know is when ministry presented itself and a man in torment needed healing, Jesus was there to meet him in his needs. So Jesus' priority is always people first. And what we'll see in this next movement is that the people of the area had another kind of priority, actually two priorities. And I would say the priority for pigs and the priority for peace. So let's continue on, verse 14. Their herdsmen, that's the herdsmen, the men taking care of the pigs, ran away and reported it in the city. And as they were running, they're probably going, I'm dead. Our charge was to take care of these pigs. These pigs are gone, they're drowned, they're now floating bacon. I'm done. The herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the country. And all the people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon possessed sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion. So this man was a legend. This man, Legion, was a legend in the area. And some of them had probably been the ones who had tried to subdue him, who had tried to chain him, to shackle him, to restrain him, and had been thrown off as the strong man exhibited this supernatural power. So they knew who this man was, the very man who had the legion. And seeing him, they became afraid. They became frightened. Phobos. They had this disorienting fear. Kind of like the fear that the disciples had in the event where Jesus calmed the sea. They were terrified. Those who had seen it, verse 16, described it to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the pigs. And the people began to beg Jesus to leave their region. Now let's just pause here. What is going on? You see now a man who has healed a man who is on his way to a demon-catalyzed death and who has been in torment for as probably long as they can remember. And now he has gone from this raging lunatic of a countenance to this man now clothed, which means he was probably naked among the tombs, clothed and in his right mind, and in a state of peace that he had not known in who knows how long. And so you would think that there would be joy and wonder and questions for Jesus, and this recognition that, hey, I have this friend or I have this family member. Can you come? Will you serve us? We have many here that are to be healed, but the reaction is just the opposite. Will you go away from us? We beg you. That word, that verb there, they began to beg or implore, is literally a verb of strong desire to eject. They began to beg him to leave their region. And what I see here is a priority for the pigs and a false kind of peace. You see, Jesus always upsets our organizing principles of life. whenever he comes into contact with us. His presence, his authority, his teaching, and his expectations. As great as his grace is, there's always this authority in his presence and this set of expectations for what it means to follow him. And we often just want to eject. But there's another thing going on here, and it's the competition between a desire for material livelihood and comfort and Jesus's threats to upset our own needs to be comfortable and secure in material provision. And so somebody had owned these pigs. Maybe multiple people owned them. It could be that this is a combined set of ownership in this herd of 2,000. So what we see here is processed bacon no longer available for sale, scrumptious pork chops now off the shelves, and therefore the return, the purchase for these items were no longer an option. They were gone. And so if you look at it from sort of a pragmatic sense, the pigs had been offered as a healing for the man. So the pigs had been sacrificed for the purpose of this person. Now, I would say, from a principled, noble perspective, that I think that's more than a fair trade. The life of these pigs for the peace of this person and the spiritual health of this man who had been tormented. Wouldn't you? I think we would all nod yes. But interestingly, as I look at my own life and my own desire for material comfort and the opportunities that I continue to have to invest my material comfort in spiritual movements that would bring healing and health and spiritual vitality to people who don't have that, like in mission and in places of poverty and in places where the Bible is not known, I see that I don't take advantage of those. Instead, I have a tendency to hold on to the pigs. How about you? It's really interesting that the more pigs we have, the fewer we're willing to sacrifice. If I only have 10 pigs, I'd probably give you one for the purposes of spiritual movement and mission. If I have 100 pigs and you ask for 10, I'd probably go there with you. If I have 1,000 pigs and you ask me for 100 so that people can be healed spiritually and be given the opportunity for new life in Jesus, that becomes a little more of a struggle. I mean, that's 100 pigs. And if I have 100,000 pigs and you ask me for 10,000 pigs, and even though you promise me that there's spiritual return and the kingdom crop for that investment would be immense and bring God much praise and glory, I got a real challenge because this materialistic pull and my ownership are being threatened. Do we value people or pigs? It's a good question, right? And there's another value here that I see that these people are expressing, and that's peace, but the wrong kind of peace. They desire a peace from not having their apple cart upset, from not having their organizing principles of life threatened. And that's what Jesus is doing. When they see this man and they see the pigs are gone, they realize, oh man, I may have to rethink the way my life is working, or the way life works best. And they knee-jerk to just get his presence out of here. So this final movement is from verse 17. When they beg him to leave their region, do you know what he does? He says, your will be done. He may have planned to been there for days or weeks, but they immediately ask him to leave, and he does. Interesting for the one who has all authority. So finally, we see a priority from the man who was healed, and that priority is proclamation. Verse 18, As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed was begging him. There's that verb again. He was begging him to go with them, where the crowd, the people who had their apple cart upset, their priorities questioned and challenged, they were begging him to go away. This man was begging him, can I stay with you? Imploring him that he might accompany Jesus. And Jesus did not let him, but he said to him, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he had mercy on you. And the man went away and began to proclaim. That's the same verb that we use for preaching in the English language. And we've talked about this previously in our study. Anytime proclaim is used in the New Testament context, it's not a platform preaching context. It's merely a verbal announcement with emphasis, conviction, and passion of the mercy that you've been shown in Jesus Christ. He began to proclaim in the Decapolis, the 10 cities, what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. That word amazed means amazed. Like, what happened to this guy? People were asking that about me, who knew me as the tormented man. And then in 1991, March 31st, began this journey now with Jesus, where people were amazed. What happened to this guy? He seems to be in his right mind. Isn't that a crazy story? But there's lots of energy towards just terror and disorientation here. First, the disciples still trying to figure out who Jesus is, and they go right from the frying pan of the sea into the fire of the tombs. Then there's the man who is possessed, now healed, and gone from being terrified to being at peace. And then there's the people whose priority are in pigs and their own organizing principles that they want to remain comfortable in. And then there's a priority of the man once terrified, now at peace, having been shown mercy, eager to proclaim. It just gets richer and richer as Jesus is revealed to the world. So a few things here. From a biblical worldview perspective, people always have priority. Human beings are the only ones made in the image of God and are to be highly valued in all stages of humanity, from the womb to the grave. Human beings are to have priority. Jesus is most sought. I'm just making statements here that I distilled. Jesus is most sought when we are at our most desperate. This is the man who came and rushed and bowed and sought him out immediately. Jesus is most sought when we are at our most desperate. And what we need to remember is we are all most desperate. We are born desperate because there's just void in us where we can't reconnect with God on our own. And we spend much of our lives trying to maintain this billboard facade of significance, and the desperation grows. That's when we seek Jesus, when we finally let the facade down and invite Jesus in. Jesus threatens the comfort zone and organizing principles of every life he contacts. C.S. Lewis said that if you want to choose a religion to follow, don't choose Christianity. It is the least comfortable. And I agree with that. Don't you? Jesus, the one with all authority, will not violate the dignity of your choice. That's part of being made in the image of God. When the people beg him to leave, he leaves. When the man invites him in, he enters. The one with all authority will not violate the dignity of our humanity, which is free will and choice. Even if your choice is to refuse your greatest need, which is Jesus himself. And finally, proclamation of Jesus' mercy should be the natural response of Jesus' mercy. verbal expression of Jesus' mercy to us should be the natural response of Jesus' mercy to us. I think that's all I got today. Pigs or people? Peace.